if you haven't noticed, there's a raft of education sector reforms that the current Minister for Education is undertaking. And he's been outlining them yesterday at the press conference. On PM Express, of course, we go, as they say, the devil is always in the detail. We are going to be breaking these down for you. And if indeed there are any devils in that detail, we'll find it. We're going to be probing these reforms that he's laid out for us yesterday. Let's go through them. And there are a few key ones, indeed, that we need to be isolating for focus. Now, government is set to pilot a secondary education structure that mirrors the Cambridge system from next year. And they're starting with 10 schools with a pilot. And that is very important. It's such a bold step to say you want to mirror what Cambridge does, because Cambridge is an internationally acceptable, world standard system indeed. And there are many middle-class people who have their children in Cambridge institutions, although they are in Ghana. And so this is pretty attractive. But there's one thing saying you want to do it, and there's another thing laying the systems to actually make that a reality. So, but they started with a pilot of 10 schools. But what are the key specifics of this? According to the Education Minister, the method is to improve various junior high schools to the standard of senior high schools. So we're going to have a situation where the junior high schools that seem to be very deprived in terms of the 21st century. That's one of those phrases that is beginning to surface a lot. 21st century education system. To think that we are now talking about 21st century education system, 21st century schools in the year 2022 itself is worrying, but of course, better late than never. The system that he also want to introduce also to ensure a seamless transition from one level to the other. So we don't have the system where you move from junior high school, people drop out, and then you go to senior high school, we have less number of people who started the junior high school who are not making their way to senior high school for whatever reason. It's going to be seamlessly integrated into one. Now, this table here gives you a better appreciation of this new system that the Education Minister is championing. And so currently, you have the current system. You have the KG primary is 8 years, and then you have 3 years of junior high school, and then you have 3 years of senior high school. What the Education Ministry is talking about is you will still have your 8 years of KG primary school, but now these two will no longer exist as we know it. They're going to be in one. They're going to be 6 years now together. Okay, so that is simply talking about years. But in real substance, what is going to change? What is going to change in real substance? And so you're simply collapsing 3 years, 2 separate 3 years into one to have 6 years. But in real substance, what is going to change? We're getting a few clues about what is going to change. The 6-year secondary school, the Education Ministry has said, by the way, so a new policy. Okay, it says it's always been there since 1997. But the truth is, as it is right now, we have a junior secondary school and a senior secondary school, senior high school. So junior high school and senior high school, they're two separate entities. They don't even exist at all. They don't interact until you finish. You write your BECE, and then then you move on. That qualifies you to get into the senior high school. And so that we need to clarify that a bit. And then what is going to happen? Are we still going to have the junior high school certificate examinations which you write? We're going to get into that, break it down a bit more for you. Now, so I was asking a question in terms of real substance, what is going to happen? This is what is going to happen. So there are 21st century, and this is the minister's favorite line, 21st century career subjects that if you are in that 6 years, you will be asked to take. Environmental science, something that is so key. But think about this. Aeronautics and aerospace engineering at that level, which is fundamentally very important. Aeronautics and aerospace engineering at that level. The facilities come to mind. Do we really have them? And we're talking about computer science, which they already do. So you're thinking about, okay, but this is junior high school too. That is being. So are we saying the junior high schools will also be doing computer science? The Education Minister says yes. I went to junior high school. I only saw a computer for the very first time in the senior high school. But the Education Minister says that is going to change. And so the junior high level from JHS1, you begin to play and interface with the computer. That's why you have computer science there. Manufacturing, very important. Biomedical sciences, another key thing that they will be studying at that level. Agricultural science, global studies, creative arts, all of this is going to come into play now at that level for 6 years of education. Now, the other thing that the education minister, there's a lot of innovative ideas that he's introducing. Affiliations. Even the international schools in Ghana currently, they are affiliated to one school or the other in the West. The minister says we're now going to have schools in Ghana at the junior and senior high schools now collapse into one, partnering with schools in Dubai, in UK, and elsewhere. So this is pretty fascinating stuff indeed. TVET. TVET is going to be, in terms of the substance now we're talking about, these changes. TVET is now going to be front and center of that new system we're talking about. 139 non-GS TVET schools have now been moved to the national system. Talking about funding, 60 million secured under Ghana Jobs and Skills Project, a seed money for Skills Development Fund as well. All this come into play this year. STEM, which is going to be one of the fundamental changes to this new structure that we are talking about. 10 model schools are going to be built. Contracts for, again, this is the point I was making, 21st century model schools, the minister says, have now been awarded. And 20 STEM centers are also under construction. And so if you look at the numbers, there's also a focus on training teachers with the skills to do this. And the minister is also showing us, this is from the ministry, by the way, this is what World Bank that the ministry was also relying on, that we've also picked up on and verified. So if you look at the gross tertiary enrollment rate, it's been going up, which is a good thing. So we are talking about a low of 13.83%. We are talking about 20% in 2021. Since this government took office in 2017, it dropped in 2018, but has since been consistently on the up, which is positive. It means something positive is happening pre-tertiary, which is qualifying a lot more people into the tertiary level. And so if we come to the tertiary level, there are a few more changes too. The ministry is proposing running the tailor-made courses in school leadership and management, and there are already a key consultations happening. Schools will be prioritized, for example, in terms of resource allocations in this area, establishment of 12 state-of-the-art TVET institutes, development of 10 of 35 new STEM senior high schools, construction of 21st century JHS, that's a junior high school, in selected urban communities. Again, that phrase is playing out again in what the ministry wants to do. So there's a lot that the ministry is doing, so many things at the same time. Is that even the best approach to take? We're going to be probing this, and my guests who are joining me right after this break. Stay with me. Joining me right now to look at the issues I've just laid out for you, Kofi Asare is Executive Director of the Africa Education Watch. Also joining us is Angel Kabon, who is the President of NAGRAT, both of them joining us on Zoom. We're expecting Kwesi Kwarteng, he's a spokesperson of the Ministry of Education, to also join us on Zoom on this conversation. I want to start with you, Mr. Asare. And so we've heard the raft of reforms that the Education Minister is implementing. I want to start with what I consider to be the headliner, which is a fundamental change in trying to get our education system, both at the junior high school and the senior high school, to mirror the Cambridge system, where we are collapsing this junior high school and SHS 3 years into a 6 years continuous education, with substantive changes in the curriculum itself, as I illustrated just before we started. First, give me your thoughts on this broad policy shift. Hello, Mr. Asare.
Hi, Iwan.
Mr. Asare, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great to have you. Mr. Kabano, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? I
can, yes. Mr. Asare, I wanted to give me your quick thought. I mean, on what I consider to be the most important of these, or the fundamental shift in getting our education system at the junior and senior high schools to mirror the Cambridge system. Well, what's your thought on that?
Well, let me begin by indicating that I acknowledge the efforts of the Ministry of Education to strengthen the weakest link in our pre-tertiary education system, which we all know has always been the junior high school system. Prior to the junior high school system, we had a 7-year secondary system where students had 7 years of secondary education in a much more supervised environment where facilities were much more enhanced. Unfortunately, we have a junior high school system now that looks more like a senior primary school than a junior secondary school. It's actually supposed to be a junior secondary school because facilities there are zero. It's actually 3 rooms, from 1, from 2, from 3. That's junior high school 1, 2, 3, and nothing else. Now, we believe that the current system, where even with the no facility junior high schools, 25% of primary schools do not even have the 3 rooms as junior high schools, much more talk about science and technology facilities. We believe that any approach to strengthening the quality of junior high school education by ensuring that it has science and technology facilities should first appreciate the rural-urban dichotomy and the existing inequality in the distribution of education resources and outcomes. What am I saying? I'm saying that we should appreciate that the current system benefits to an extent urban schools and to a higher extent affect rural schools and deprive the street especially negatively because up to 25% of deprived schools do not have junior high schools. In the northern region, 40% of primary schools do not have junior high schools. And if you go to some districts like Sydney, close to 60% of primary schools do not have junior high schools. So if you want to solve the problem, your solution should first look at the equity dimension first. How is my solution ensuring that children in rural areas where majority of primary schools are and do not have access to junior high schools at all will be served? How will they be served by my intervention? That should be the first thing. Then you go to how will students in urban communities that have junior high schools but are not resourced with science facilities also be served by the facilities? These are the first 2 questions in the order of priority that we must answer as we roll out any pilot. But what we are presently saying is that we have been told that there is a 21st century model school being built in some areas. And that 21st century school will actually replace 12 junior high schools everywhere it's planted in this area. Meaning, if the school is planted in Atenta, 12 schools in Atenta municipality or around Atenta will now have attend junior high school in that particular model school. I call it the cluster-based approach to providing junior high school education. Now, that school will have enhanced STEM facilities, enhanced facilities that a proper junior secondary school or junior high school should have, which is fantastic. But the question is that how does this approach solve the problem of inequality in access? Because if you move this concept to rural areas, you realize that already the distance covered to school is more than 10 kilometers. The average rural child walks to the next community to attend junior high school, covering about 10 kilometers a day. Now, if you are going to expand that already existing and worrying distance covered to school, which is acknowledged in the government-owned education strategic plan, by placing the junior high school in a central location for 12 schools, for 12 primary schools to attend, then you will end up increasing the distance covered to school instead of reducing it as captured as the strategy government is pursuing in the education strategic plan. That is the point of confusion. So we will need more clarity from the ministry in respect of what it really intends to do, because as of now, it is bits of and pieces of what we call a proposal being thrown at us. We have not seen any policy document, the basis of which the pilot is being informed that about 100 million is going into this construction, which is supposed to lead to a pilot that will start next year. Looking at the quantum of investment going into the infrastructure, which will lead to just a pilot. So the pilot not work, what happened? We have wasted 100 million. So it means that unlike your usual pilot, where you will decide to pilot before you consult, you rather do the consultation on your proposal before you pilot, because the pilot is costing in excess of 100 million. That is why we are not too sure what the ministry is doing in respect of access to the wider population. But even in the urban population, in the municipality, in the district capital, where you can say that, yes, you can put a junior high school in the district capital and expect that 12 schools around the district capital or towns nearby can access that junior high school and access better facilities there. But what will be the real situation? The real situation is that if you plan this school in, let's say, in Adenta again, someone living in Trazaco area, Adjirigano, will have to commute all the way to Adenta to attend that school, because Adenta, the street goes all the way to Adjirigano. If by virtue of this cluster approach, the distance to school is being expanded in urban communities, it will require that extra cost of transport will now be imposed on poor families whose children attend public schools. Now, we are currently doing a research in 15 districts, including Lejekuku. In basic schools in Lejekuku, the biggest problem is that parents are not buying exercise books for their children in basic schools. Don't forget that there's free exercise books in secondary school, but there's no free exercise book in basic school. So students don't have exercise books to write in. If you add the burden of transportation on such parents, how do you think it will affect attendance and then also retention, even though you would have provided a model, beautiful 21st century school at a central location, but you will still have access issues, you still have attendance issues, it will affect retention, and the quality of attendance will affect the learning outcome. So this is why...
Stay with me. I mean, there's so much to interrogate there based on what you said, but I quickly want to bring in Njo Kabonu, who, of course, is a teacher and a major stakeholder in this. First off, Mr. Kabonu, as a rep of the graduate teachers, has there been any consultations with you and your members on these new, on the reforms that the Education Ministry is pushing?
Well, Evans, I have not cited any reform document, or I have not cited any comprehensive reform document. And if you have, upon which we are having this discussion, you can help us and share them with us. Education reform is a very, very serious...
Yeah, I agree. Let me just state, because of what you said. What I have is, yesterday when the education minister finished the press conference and laid out these details, I requested to see, can I get a presentation, which is what they gave us. And we said, okay, let's look at it. So that is the basis. That's the document we have. It's a very detailed 40 slides that has all these details in them.
Well, so reforms does not only limit itself to one aspect of education. We're talking about reform from kindergarten level to senior high school level. We're talking about reforms in curriculum. We're talking about reforms in subjects that are taught in the senior high schools. And we're also talking about reform that links the outcome of senior high school products to the various programs that are done in the universities. Because when programs are done in the senior high schools and they do not relate to what is happening in the universities, you are going to have a very big problem. Now, who are the members of the reform committee? And did they do any roadshow, or did they go through our communities to interrogate our chiefs, our local people? And do they have a draft that have been interrogated by various stakeholders, so that the various stakeholders will make input to the draft? And like my brother Kofi is saying, is there no necessity to pilot the reforms? Because when you go through the education history of our country, when you take the 1951 Kwame Nkrumah education reforms, if you take the 1986 reforms, if you take the Justice Professor Anamwa's reform, these are documents, comprehensive documents that have served as standards of reference. Now, when you don't have a holistic reform document, you will take one aspect and that single aspect will seem to be working for you. But when you relate that aspect to other aspects, you will realize that the synchronization do not exist, and you have a situation where there is some disconnect and some disjointed outcomes that itself needs another form of reform. So reform is part of human life. Reform is part of education. We want to know who constitutes the reform, is it committee or reform group? The caliber of people they are, which other education intellectuals they have consulted, what papers have been presented, what is the final reform document that I can pick and sit with a group of educationists and interrogate and critique it. When you look at all the reforms that we've had in this country, you had a situation where the president of the country led the reform agenda. The reform had a theme, and it was so holistic. And so we want to look at what we are dealing with. Honestly speaking, I have not met any member of any reform committee. I have not seen any reform draft document that I interrogated. I don't know who people consulted, and so on and so forth. So whereas I admit that reform is part of education, we will want to have a more holistic approach so that we do not fix one aspect and then create another problem at another aspect. And in an attempt to fix that aspect, we come to some other aspect. So I am a little bit at sea as to what we are talking about. Are we talking about a holistic education reform, or we are just talking about one aspect that we want to refine? I do not know.
I mean, the focus from what both interviews the education minister had granted us and his press conference yesterday, of course, there's a focus on the primary, but the main focus appears to be pre-tertiary, junior high school, secondary high school, where he emphasized quite heavily this dichotomy we created between junior high school, senior high school, where the junior high schools do not seem to have any form of resources to get a 21st century graduate prepared to change that. And so we're going to merge the two into 6 years, mirroring what we have in Cambridge. Isn't that a brilliant idea?
Well, the word Cambridge sounds exciting, but I don't think that alone is enough. Because, look, if there are no resources in junior high schools, we know what we are supposed to do. We are just supposed to channel resources to the junior high school. We have had a very politicized senior high school situation where senior high school has become a political toothbrush on a daily basis. And to a very large extent, we have abandoned or neglected the most important part of education in any country in the world, which is the basic school. And I'm talking about from kindergarten level to the junior high school level. And like the Christian will tell you that the Bible says that teach a child the way he or she should go, and he or she will never grow to depart from it. The foundation of education in any country in the world is the basic school system. And when you move around this country, I ask the question, what is the standard school environment that becomes a source of reference for us in determining what we can call a good school environment or not. And that is a very Herculean task to solve. We're talking about getting to every village, every hamlet, every town, and every city in this country where we have government schools sited and located.
But on a basic school question, isn't why the Education Ministry has rolled out this new curriculum? We have, they fully implementing the pre-tertiary curriculum from KG to primary 6. Isn't that such a fundamental change in the way things are done? Because the curriculum is really the heart of everything you do at education at the basic level, correct?
When you change curriculum, beautiful. When the environment and the resources are not there to serve as a conveyor belt or the vehicle to move the curriculum from a concept to reality, I doubt how the expected outcome of that curriculum can be achieved. I'm talking about a situation where the infrastructure in our basic schools is very questionable. The environment is inadequate. The environment does not motivate both teachers and students to learn. The environment itself is offensive to the desire by the children to study. So the curriculum, yes, you may have changed the curriculum, but if the resources are not there to transfer the curriculum from concept into the minds and the hearts of the children, in vain do you change the curriculum. So I'm saying that the problem of basic schools in this country is the lack of resources, it is the lack of adequate infrastructure, is the lack of motivation, is the lack of congenial atmosphere that is conducive for teaching and learning to take place.
Okay, I mean, let me bring in Kofi Asare. Kofi Asare, the minister says these changes that he's introducing, he wants to start with a pilot. And you commented on the pilot already to say we're going to spend money there. But that's the right thing to do, is it not? You cannot roll anything out, especially when it comes to education, without trying it first. And he wants to try it first in 10 schools across the country. I mean, he's doing the right thing, is he not?
Evans, I started by saying that he's doing the right thing by identifying that there's a problem that needs to be resolved. But listen very well. Listen. There is a difference between ideas and policy. Okay? Ideas are brilliant, and Ghana has never lacked ideas. The minister has ideas. But ideas are different from policy. The process of conceptualizing policy through ideas are there. Once an idea comes and you want to take it through policy, you need to consult on the idea, get other ideas from stakeholders within the sector, including the parents, okay? So that on the basis of that, you can have a consolidated idea that appeals to the various concerns or interests that you need to set, especially the beneficiaries, the students, the teachers. So having an idea is a different thing, which has never been lacking in this country. And having it in the form of a proper policy is a different thing. Our challenge in Sub-Saharan Africa is poor implementation of beautiful policy. It is not the lack of ideas. Let me put that one at one side. Second, in 2007, during the Anamwa Mensa committee, let me give you an example. At that time, I was working with my organization in people in my world. I was in France. The education reform of 2007. These street consultations were held, and my organization participated at the community level in the district consultation in people in my world at the forecourt of the assembly. Okay, that at the end of that extensive nationwide consultation, a document was developed, which was the reform document. So it was an amalgam, a compendium of all the concerns, the aspirations, the opinions that citizens expressed in respect of the challenges that President Kufuor wanted to resolve. When that document was launched by President Kufuor at the National Theatre, I was there. Okay? Now, What I want to say is that every practitioner, every parent, every PTA, SM, every practitioner, CSO, had a copy of this reform document, which guided all of us in respect of our collective responsibility in contributing to its standard. It is that reform that brought up institutions like court. Okay? Now, that is how you do reform and expect all stakeholders to come on board and play their role. This reform we have has no reform document. This reform we have has no policy. Every now and then you hear of new ideas being done, and one was the meta system that was aborted. It was an idea. So you haven't defined the reform. You haven't defined the reform and documented it. Neither have you developed policy in the various reform areas that can be reviewed. So on what basis will you expect educationists? I am not an educationist, but on what basis will you expect the educationists to make an input into the reform if there is no policy guiding the reform and there is no reform document? Then it means that what you are doing is that you are actually implementing ideas. But even as we speak, the document you even have is a PowerPoint presentation. That is not a policy document. 2 weeks ago, the minister launched, 3 weeks ago, the minister and the president cut short for a STEM academy. When stakeholders asked for a policy document guarding that STEM academy, 30 million Ghana cedis, which is supposed to be constructed in its bond, they said in 2 weeks' time the policy document is ready. Do you cut a short for 30 million for a STEM academy, something new in Ghana? We don't know what about it, new. And then the policy document will be ready thereafter. It means that you are implementing ideas. You are not implementing policy. And that is my key problem. Now, piloting an idea is not how you go around policy implementation. It is very good and wise to pilot policy. The reason why I am happy that the pilot. But the point I am making is that if you want to pilot the cluster-based secondary school approach, where you are going to have every 12 primary schools attend one junior high school, which is standard compared to what they have now, where they don't have. You want pilots in India. But what must inform your pilot shouldn't be your idea. It should be your idea, the idea of the parent in Damsuku whose child commutes 10 kilometers to school in the next community. The idea of the parent in Kofi Group, in America Central, who starts that 7 to 8 miles every day because of senior high school. And the idea of the parents in Adenta, whose child has 2 kilometers or 1 kilometer access to a junior high school. You have to consult these people and then let your ideas be universally accepted by these beneficiaries, not as CSOs per se. So that your idea you are piloting will be a draft policy. Before you pilot at this magnitude and spend 100 million or over on such 10 huge projects taking place, and I've seen some of the projects, the one in Orange, for instance, I've seen it. Before you do this, you must be certain that your idea has been hacked into a draft policy. Okay, with stakeholders on board, that we think that let's try this approach for metropolitan areas or district capital. And then let's look for another approach for rural areas. But we haven't seen anything like that. So if every minister comes and spends 100 million in implementing ideas, you know how the country will look like every year. So that's the point you are making. So it's not about we are against it. We are actually commending government, the ministry, for piloting, deciding that from next year it will pilot it. But the issue is that what you are piloting has not been subject to any rigorous review by the beneficiaries themselves. I won't talk about this. I'm talking about the beneficiaries. And so how are you convinced that this idea that you are spending more than 100 million to pilot will, at least at the point of conception, capture the key concerns of students who don't have access to junior high schools at all, first, and second, students who have access to junior high schools, but the junior high schools are not, do not have facilities. Then you get to know that the problem is that even if you put a junior high school in Adenta and ask someone who is living in Tantor to come from Tantor, which is Adenta, to Adenta, the person will spend more on transport than they will spend at the private junior high school in Tantor if they pay. Then, so it's only when you engage these people that you understand that let me broaden my idea and pilot it this way. And for God's sake, why do you need 10 schools to pilot?
How many schools is ideal?
You don't need more than 3 schools to pilot this. That is if you have actually submitted your idea to broader consultation. You don't need more than 3 schools. You need one in the metropolitan area, one in the peri-urban area, and then one in the deprived community. You need only 3. Because we know the demographic dynamics in the sector. You are dealing with deprived communities where schools are sparsely or distantly located from communities, where children are commuting 5 to 10 kilometers to school. And then we are dealing with peri-urban areas where population is not that much dense. And then you are dealing with urban areas where population is dense, where you can find up to 6 schools in a district capital or a municipal capital. So you don't make sense. So it tells you that the politicians already have planned that they are doing what they are doing. What you are seeing, my brother, it's not a pilot. What pilot is it? It's not a pilot.
Okay.
In fact, it is an idea being implemented.
Stay with me. I want to test some of the things you said with one of the key stakeholders, the teachers. Mr. Kabonu is with me. Mr. Kabonu, the focus of what the Education Ministry plans to do going forward is STEM. And the minister was very emphatic on it. There's a reason why we're going to have these, model schools, 10 STEM schools at various stages of completion. In fact, he said yesterday, contracts for 10 21st century model schools have already been awarded. 20 STEM centers are under construction. Now, he also talks about introducing gifted and talented education, which is something he calls GATE, at the senior high school. And they gave a status update on that, which is stakeholder consultations are ongoing. But let me come to the STEM question. If STEM is going to be the focus of secondary education going forward, the teacher, yourself, and your colleagues will have to be implementing this. Are you properly briefed on this trajectory of doing things which the Education Ministry is performing with contracts already being awarded and schools being built?
Well, science, technical, maths, education,
and engineering
is being the focus. It's been the focus of government for a very long time. As a matter of fact, you realize that moving forward, everybody is talking about science education, and we need to intensify science education. We need to intensify technical education. We need to intensify technology, and I'm talking about ICT and so on and so forth. So for me, I think that what we have to do is to bring, and then if you recall, we have certain schools selected in this country that became the science resource centers, and those resource centers were serving cluster of senior high schools within the environment. So you have a number of senior high schools drive into one particular school, which was the science resource center for science practical education. I will say that the best thing is that every senior high school should have a well-resourced science laboratory. Every senior high school should have a well-resourced technology laboratory, and so on and so forth. Look, during the education reform time, NAGRAT as a union opposed the separation of vocational technical schools to be independent from other senior high schools before, because we believe that all that you could have done was to open a department and make sure that every senior high school does have a vocational department, technical department, science department, and so on and so forth. Because, for example,
so you must be happy. You must be happy now that this education minister says now TVET is going to be part of the secondary education, and it's not going to be separate anymore. That's something that must please you, at least.
Yeah, TVET should be part of senior high school education. So you go to PRESEC, there should be the TVET department in PRESEC.
Yeah,
when you go to Wesley Girls, there should be TVET department in Wesley Girls. You don't need to separate the TVET department and get another service with a director general to run TVET. That is duplication of functions and waste of national resources. Look, when I was in school, there was no department called Home Economics Department. There was no department called Visual Arts Department. Look, if we feel that TVET is very important in this country, let us make TVET as a department in the senior high schools. Look, a lot of parents would prefer their children to be doing TVET in Wesley Girls than to go and do other subjects in some other schools. And indeed, the colonial authorities in the past, Achimota, if you hear about Nkuleni, Madam Esther Oku, Madam Esther Oku, but her company's name is Nkuleni. She learned the rudiments of her entrepreneurship at Achimota School, those days run by the colonial authorities. When you go to Infantsipon Senior High School they say we should call it Infantsipon School. When you go there, we have technical department. If we have neglected the technical department and have overemphasized on the general arts department, that creates an army of unemployed youth. We will have to change the focus and say that when you go to every school, percentage of students doing TVET should be this, percentage of students doing general arts should be this, percentage of students doing integrated science should be this, and let the heads of schools follow that. A lot of people come to senior high school to do general arts as a result of ignorance. I have a lot of my students who did general arts, and today they are in the fashion industry. They are into other aspects because they themselves and their parents were ignorant at the time that they were coming to senior high school. So everybody comes in and says, I want to do general arts. So TVET should be part of mainstream senior high school.
Yeah, I mean,
but that department in a mainstream.
But that is what this education minister says is going to happen now. So that solves the problem, does it not?
Well, if that is what can happen, I'm very happy about that. But I do know that they have now established a TVET service with a director general. What is that person going to do?
Yes.
Duplication of functions that is absolutely unnecessary.
Yes, I mean, just to clarify that, yesterday the minister gave an update on what you just said. He says that they've created a Ghana TVET service, which will be responsible for TVET and skills training policy implementation. So that is the clarity. They're going to be responsible for policy implementation, and they have a TVET service, which of course has been council, which has been inaugurated. They have a director general and the deputy director general, and they have a TVET headquarters. I mean, Mr. Kabunu, the clarity is that the service will be implementing the policy.
Evans, there is a problem there. In Ghana, we are confusing trade schools with senior high schools that do TVET. They are two different institutions. We have trade schools that you, Evans, after you get so bored in being a journalist, you can go into a trade school for 6 months and you learn how to lay tiles. People can walk into trade schools out of JSS or out of SSS and they can learn skills. So trade schools should be separated from senior high schools. When you have a TVET service that have, all 47 regional technical institutions have been hired from the Ghana Education Service so as to fall under the TVET service. What this is going to do is that they are going to suffer what I describe as credibility paralysis. After 5-10 years, you go into those schools and you hardly find students who want to do those courses because those institutions are going to suffer what I describe as credibility paralysis. Let the technical schools be senior high schools that emphasize on technical vocational education. They are senior high schools. And then bring technical vocational education into Wesley Girls, Holy Child, St. Augustine's, Prempeh, Tamale Senior High School, and you will have within 3 years a quantum leap of students who have studied the fundamentals and rudimentaries of technical vocational education, and they can be admitted in the technical universities in this country. Yeah. Let us stop this bureaucratic and institutional creation that absorb resources, and those resources add up to nothing.
I mean, I want to take a break. When I return, what the education minister announced yesterday is that they are going to be introducing at the secondary level new secondary career pathways, and which will include studying stuff like aeronautics and aerospace engineering at the secondary school level. This is your typical junior high school, senior high school now doing aeronautics and aerospace engineering. They'll be doing manufacturing. They'll be doing biomedical sciences. They'll be doing global studies. And he gave an update on where they are with making this a reality. He says there's a curriculum writing group that has already been constituted. A curriculum writing group already been constituted to write the curriculum for these fascinating new subjects that Angel Kabonu and his colleagues will have to be teaching. When we return, this is very important. We'll get my guest thoughts on this new intervention going forward after the break. Stay with me. My guest here on PM Express, and if you're a parent, indeed, this definitely is a conversation that you must be paying attention to. The Education Minister has laid out his plans for the sector, including some of the changes he's bringing in. You're hearing some of the stakeholders talk about what their thoughts are on this. Just before the break, I was detailing one key aspect of the new system that we'll be seeing going forward, which is this collapsing of the junior and senior high schools into one to have a 6-year, calendar. And my guest, Angel Kabonu, heads the National Association of Graduate Teachers, and Kofi Asare, of course, with the African Education Watch, helping me break these very important matters down. I have a few minutes to go, but I want to jump into some of the fundamental. So let's go to the substance of what is going to change. We talk about STEM, which is going to be a heavy focus now. But we are now getting to know a bit new introductions in terms of courses. And already, according to the Education Minister yesterday, we have a curriculum writing group that is already being constituted and already working so that at the secondary level, your children will now be studying aeronautics and aerospace engineering. They'll be studying manufacturing. They'll be studying biomedical sciences. Mr. Kabonu, this must excite you if you have a child in a secondary school, and as a teacher, that you're going to be equipped to teach your children, such 21st century courses at the secondary level. Hello, Mr. Kabonu, can you hear me?
Yeah. Evans, can you hear me?
I can, yes. Can you?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I don't know if you...
Evans,
yes.
I am not a curriculum expert, but I think I will...
We lost him there. Let's hope that we could rectify that so we can get his final thoughts on this. But let me quickly bring in Kofi Asare whilst we try and fix the connection to Mr. Kabonu we lost there. Mr. Asare, your quick thoughts on this.
Mr. Hayamak, on his STEM agenda at the senior high school level. It is consistent with government STEM policy. The policy is to improve the percentage of STEM participation from 15% to 60%. And you can only get 60% of students pursuing STEM at the tertiary level by starting from the basic and then through to the secondary. At the secondary level, is done very well. The review of the curriculum is one key thing because the policy indicates clearly that we need to review our curriculum at the senior high school level to let it reflect the market reality and also let's be more skills-led, market-led, and then I think that's exactly what he's doing. My only concern is that I will be happy to see teachers being part of this committee drafting the curriculum. I know that the committee should compose highly of industry actors. I know Ashasi University is playing a key role there because they have some beautiful curriculum in most of these areas. But it will be important to also let teachers be represented so that when the curriculum is developed, it will enhance the acceptance level. I was happy about the way the ministry implemented the basic school implemented the development of the basic school curriculum because it was consultative, and I will be happy if the same approach is adopted after the committee has done it. We can engage stakeholders and then have something that be more acceptable. I am optimistic that if we have such programs developed at secondary level, don't forget that more than half of the secondary school graduates will not be tertiary. So if we have them acquiring such middle level skills at the secondary level, even if they are not able to progress tertiary, they wouldn't become an unemployment burden on the state because they would have acquired mid-level skills in ICT, in ICT related vocation, to make them employable. And so I am all for whatever is taking place within the secondary level STEM curriculum review process. But the point I want to make is that for all this to be relevant, you must improve participation in STEM at the basic level, at the junior high school level. So if you have about 25% of primary not having junior high school, and for that matter not having any engagement in STEM at the junior high school level, you must be much more interested in ensuring that there is equity in ensuring participation in STEM. At the end of the day, the target for the country is that 60% of our students must participate or must become science students when they get to the secondary school. And you can only ensure that if you start enhancing their participation across the whole junior high and not in selected locations.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Mr. Sari, we ran out of time on this. I was hoping to hear Mr. Kabuno, but we just ran out of time on this, and unfortunately, the Zoom link also dropped at a terrible time to have his thoughts on in the introduction of some of these new courses at the secondary level. This is a running conversation indeed, and we'll return to it definitely at some point. To bring a bit more of the stakeholders into the conversation, including parents, by the way, and the school administrators and the education ministry, because there's a lot more questions that is begging for answers on this matter. This is PMS. Enjoy the rest of your evening.